All right, we are going to pick up where we left off last time. And before we get to David, we got to do Saul. And so we got to wind Saul down. So Saul is going to get kind of winded down here. He was the first king of Israel. And now we're going to basically see the downside of Saul. And this is Saul's mistake, which takes place then in chapter 13 at Gilgal. Now, there's quite a bit of details actually in the first class. Actually, this is after Thanksgiving, and I could see people just fading out. And I think everybody's tired after Thanksgiving. I thought everybody come back refreshed. But anyway. So, Saul, he's scared. Why is Saul scared? This is, you guys are Jordan, you guys are Israel, Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. This is the canyon between the two countries of Jordan and Israel. He goes to Gilgal. Why is Saul scared? Because Gilgal is located down by Jericho in the base of this Rift Valley. And he's worried that the Philistines are going to attack him. Now, where do the Philistines usually hang out? If this is Israel, the mountains of Israel, you guys are the Mediterranean Sea, the Philistines are where? Out along the Philistine coast. They're along the coastline. It's flat out there. They like it for their chariots. And so the Philistines live on the coast. If Saul is over here in the valley and he is worried about the Philistines attacking him, what's the problem? That means the Philistines have come through the mountains of Israel and are all the way through and are ready to attack him here. Is that a really dangerous position to be in, that the Philistines have actually gone through Israel and now are coming out to Jericho? It'd be like, what would it be like if Cuba attacked Montana? Yeah, I know you guys would say, let them have it. But anyways, no. If Cuba attacked Montana, would that mean that Cuba has come up and gone through much of America to get to Montana? Is it like game over? Most of the places have been taken already? That's what this is like. The Philistines have gone through the mountains, and Saul's scared to death, and he should be scared to death. And what Samuel tells him in chapter 13 is, Samuel says, okay, you go down to Gilgal, and I will be there 7 days later, and we'll offer up a sacrifice, and we'll get the Lord's blessing on this. Well, 7 days later, where is Samuel? All of a sudden, the prophet Samuel. Are these prophets always late to meetings and stuff? So it says in chapter 13, Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops were with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days. When you're fearful, what does fear make you want to do? Do you want to stay put when you're afraid, or do you want to run? Fright leads to flight. You want to run. And so his guys are down there, they're quaking with fear, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal. Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, bring me a burnt offering and a fellowship offering. Saul says, I'm going to offer the burnt offering. Now what's the problem? He's a king. Is he a priest? No, he's not. Do you see what power does to a person? He's the king, and now he's expanding his powers. Do people in position of power like to expand their powers? And so now he's expanding his power. He's taking over priestly functions, saying, I got to do this, or my guys are going to all scatter and things. By the way, as soon as he starts to offer the sacrifice, guess who shows up? Sure enough, he starts offering the sacrifice. Samuel shows up, and Samuel replied, and this is chapter 13, when I saw that the men were scattering, Saul said, and that you did not come at the set time, and the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to make a burnt offering. Samuel's response, you have acted foolishly, said Samuel. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. And this is really fascinating. If you had, Saul, if you had kept the Lord's command, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. Very interesting statement. Saul, if you had kept the Lord's command, he would have put you up for all time. Saul says, oh, but I wanted to offer sacrifice to God. That was a pious cover-up. He uses piety. He uses religion. He uses religion to cover his sin. He uses religion to cover his sin. Is that move very common? And so Samuel isn't put off by that, and Samuel rebukes him. But in the process of rebuking him, he says, if you had kept the commandment, God would have made you and your line kings forever over Israel. This means then, is there if with God? Is there an if with God? God said, if you had obeyed, I would have made you king forever. That means there's a possibility that God was open to, but Saul made a decision contrary to that, and God responded to that. So there is an if, a possible if, that never happened, that God said, if you had done the other, I would have made you king forever. So this brings up, bless you, with that. Okay. So this is one of these cases where you see the possible futures, multiple possible futures, and here's Saul, if you had, then he would have made it. So everything is not fixed. Everything is not fixed. It's not determinism where everything is fixed and fossilized and God's saying it's moving from point A to B to C to D and everything's all fixed. No, God said, if you had done that, I would have made you king forever. So so this is a reaction against my reaction against determinism. And I think that passage is against that kind of determinism, that everything's fixed in the future. It seems like the future is more flexible and more able to be impacted. Now, what's beautiful with this literature, 1 Samuel is beautiful literature. Let me just kind of set this up. Saul in chapter 13 disobeys by offering up the sacrifice. Saul goes down in chapter 13, and in chapter 15, Saul's going to not kill the Amalekite, which God told him to do, and Saul in 15 is going to go down. So in chapters 13, Saul goes down, and in chapter 15, Saul goes down again. What's housed right between chapters 13 and chapter 15? What's housed between it? Well, chapter 14. Okay, so chapter 14 is in the middle, and chapter 14 is about Jonathan. So what you get is Saul goes down in 13, down in 15, and in the middle of this, Jonathan emerges as this wonderful young man. And I just want to run through Jonathan's story then in chapter 14, the story of Jonathan. There's not too much about Jonathan. I always tell people in the Bible, in the Old Testament, there's two heroes in the Old Testament that are kind of like flawless, Joseph and Daniel. Those two guys are like above reproach. Jonathan, everything said of Jonathan is good. The problem with Jonathan's story is he's only got a few verses, you know what I'm saying? Jonathan, you don't get a big, long description of Jonathan. Chapter 14 is the longest and stuff, so he's not at the same level as Daniel and things like that. But the story goes like this. Jonathan and his armor bearer are out in the field. They're walking outside to the east of Michmash. They're walking to the east of Michmash where the Philistines were. What you need to understand is, and I've been to the place, Wadi Suwenit, I've been to the place, the cliffs on both sides are about, 100, well, probably more than that, like 200, 250 feet high. On both sides you have cliffs, okay? Both sides you have cliffs. Jonathan and his armor bearer are walking in the valley. Why do they tell you in Israel never to walk in the valley? I think I've mentioned this before. When we were outside of east of Bethlehem, out in the Judean desert, there were three of us, all about my size or a little bit bigger. Actually, Dave's bigger than I am. And this 12-year-old Arab kid was sitting up on the top. We were walking in the valley. And we didn't know this rule that you never walk in the valleys like that. And this 12-year-old kid starts throwing stones. Probably he's, again, 200-300 feet up the cliff. And he starts throwing stones, rocks down at us, okay? When a stone comes down 200 or 300 feet and hits, question, do you have to run? And so basically this kid's up there laughing his head off as three big American guys, he's throwing stones down at us, and we're trying to dodge this kid's stones because, they're coming down hard and fast, and the stones were rocks. It would have taken off your head. And he was just laughing his head off and things. We were furious, but could we get the kid? By the time we're up there, he's long gone, and so it was lost cause. So we ran for our lives, okay? And we learned a lesson that day. You don't walk in the valley. Where's Jonathan? He's in the valley. Is he vulnerable? Is he vulnerable? Where are the Philistines? The Philistines are 250 feet up. Have they got plenty of rocks up there? Yeah. Jonathan is armor bearer. And now listen to what Jonathan says here. It's really interesting. Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised fellows. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf." Now check this out. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Where do we get something similar to that? That the Lord gives deliverance by many or by few. Does anybody remember Gideon having all those troops and sending all those guys home? And God says, hey, it just takes 300. 300 is all I need, and we'll take out the whole Midianite group and stuff. The Lord saves by many or few. Does Jonathan pray this? Is this a wonderful prayer? The Lord can save by many or by few. So just my armor bearer and me, we can go do this thing. Do all that you have in mind, his armor bearer said. Go ahead. I am with you, heart and soul. Did that armor bearer trust Jonathan? Okay. My son came back from war, and he talked about, do you have some people that lead you into war that you would follow them into the thickest battle, you would follow them to the death? Yes. Have you got other guys you wouldn't follow across the street? Okay. And he said, and one of the problems my son had is that he was a group leader kind of thing. The guys that followed him, would they have gone to death with him? And the answer is yes, because they knew that who would go first? When the door had to be knocked down, when they had to find the ID, who would go first? Would my son be the first one through? Yeah, he's really stupid. Anyways, and so he would be the first one. And my wife and I knew that, and so that's why we was like, anyways, he got shifted to another thing, and we were just really happy because he, like his many friends, and some of his friends did not come back because they did. They led by going what? They led by going first. And this armor bearer says, Jonathan, there's a bunch of Philistines up there, man. There's over 20 Philistines up there. There's 2 of us against 20. Guess who wins? By the way, do we have to climb a 250-foot cliff? By the way, you climb a 250-foot cliff and then you do hand-to-hand combat with 20 guys? What do the Philistines say? The Philistines are into this too. Both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. Look, the Philistines, said the Philistines, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes they're hiding in. The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan's armor bearer, come up to us and we'll teach you a lesson. Now, what did Jonathan tell the Lord? If they say come up, then we know the God's given them into our hands. If they say stay down, then we know the Lord's not giving them into our hands. They say, come on up here, boys. Come up here, Jew boys. We're going to teach you a thing or two up here. They got 20 guys. I mean, they're going to clean these guys out. And so they come up. By the way, could they have taken them out when they're climbing the cliffs? Could they have taken them out? All you got to do is throw some rocks down there. It's going to knock them off the cliff and stuff. But they let them get up there and things, and then what happens? Jonathan, it says, Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up with me. The Lord has given them into our hands and things. So they get up there, and basically the Philistines fell before Jonathan, his armor bearer, and they killed behind them. In the first attack, Jonathan's armor bearer killed some 20 men. 2 guys against 20. Jonathan's armor bearer take out 20 guys. Is Jonathan a warrior? Is Jonathan a warrior? Sometimes you get in Scripture, you think, oh, Jonathan's just this meek and mild little king's son and stuff like that. Is this guy a warrior? Yeah. 2 guys take out the 20 and things. And then what happens? God gets involved. Then panic struck the whole army in the camp because God basically causes the ground shook. It was panic sent by God. And so God shakes the ground. All of a sudden the Philistines realize what? These Jews got this God that split the Red Sea, and now the ground's shaking. We're going to get out of here. And so the Philistines basically are terrified from what happens. Now, here's something that I didn't realize when I was younger. In the Philistine army, there were Jewish mercenaries. How did Jonathan win the day? Well, Jonathan is a hero. Jonathan is a mighty warrior. I don't want to take that away from him. But were there Jews in the Philistine armies? By the way, who later on will join the Philistines? David does that, okay? And at this time with Jonathan, it says basically the ground shook, the Philistines freaked, and then if you go down to verse 20, it says Saul and his army assembled, went to battle. They fought the Philistines, were in total confusion, striking each other with swords. Those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines had gone up with them to their camp, went over to the Israelites. So the Israelites who were mercenaries in the Philistine army, when the Israelites attacked, those Israelites flipped sides and we actually went against the Philistines. So that was part of the battle plan too, you know what I'm saying? The Israelites who were mercenaries flip sides and Jonathan wins the day, okay? So great victory at the hands of Jonathan and the Lord wins the victory and big deal.